Today I'd like to talk to you about playing white against the Sicilian Defence. This is the Sicilian. So, unbalanced. White plays e4, black plays c5, which does nothing about development and nothing about castling, but does have a say about the centre. What it says about the centre is, if you as white play d4 and aim to continue that way, black's going to swap it off for the c pawn, and then black's going to end up with one more central pawn than you, which is might be important. Now there's lots, an incredibly complicated, detailed opening that Sicilian Defence is. It's painful to me to try and summarise it so quickly, but that's something. And very theoretical, very complicated, and an opening for life undoubtedly, and the sooner you get stuck into mainline theory the better, but just for the moment I'm going to recommend you don't play against Sicilian that way, and that you instead play c3. Now if you play d4 and black plays c takes d4, you play c takes d4, and you've still got two fine central pawns, and actually you've got rather a domination of the centre. And if black plays something nondescript like knight to c6, d4 takes and takes, and you're looking good. So black usually does something to hit back in the centre. Either they play knight to f6, trying to tempt your e pawn forward when you can't defend it easily with knight to c3 or anything, or they play d5, hitting back in the middle when you're not in a good position to play takes and knight c3. What we're heading for just generally, I think, is an isolated queen pawn position. See other videos, and the way that this might go, for example, e takes d5, queen takes d5, d4, knight f6, knight f3, and now, for example, there's bishop to g4, leaning on the knight, bishop to e2, e6, and if there's a swap in the middle on d4 takes and takes, we're going to get an isolated queen pawn position. Knight to c6, bishop e2 takes and takes, gets the same type of position. Knight f3, e6, and again we get an isolated queen pawn position. So your pieces are coming to very natural squares, so there's not a lot to learn in terms of theory, and you get to the sort of positions that you should know and play well. And this sort of position you get out of all sorts of openings. This c3 Sicilian, the c3 Sicilian, sometimes called the Alapin Sicilian, or Alapin Sicilian, and sometimes named after Sveshnikov, a modern player who just played it to death really, but often just referred to as the c3 Sicilian. And so you get it out of the c3 Sicilian, you get it out of the Panov Caracan, you get it out of the Exchange French with c4 and the Monte Carlo variation, and you get it out of lots of other openings. So if you know how to play isolated queen pawn positions, you're good to go against lots of openings. Queen to d6 in this position is a try. Queen b3, rook d1 to protect the d pawn, and b6. And white's got more space thanks to the d pawn, and the pawn might become weak in an endgame, so try and avoid an endgame. Chances are about equal, but I'm hoping that you'd find it easier to play this game for white than for black, but know how to play it for both sides. The line with knight to f6 usually continues e5, d5, and now, for example, d4 and takes. And now I think if you take back straight away, that's a bit too straightforward, and black can equalise. So knight f3 offers a pawn for development. Black usually finds that too dangerous and declines. C takes d4, d6, bishop to c4, knight to b6, so we've chased the knight to the side of the board. And now bishop to b5, bishop to d7 takes, and black doesn't want an isolated d pawn themselves, so they play e6, castles takes, knight c3, bishop to d3. So again we've got an isolated d pawn for white. The king's bishops have found a a better home than in the last line we looked at. But it's still very early days for the middle game, and again, I hope you look forward to playing this for white. Very sensible squares for your pieces, and plenty of chances to outplay black in the rest of the game. So that's the C3 Sicilian. I'll just run through a couple of games to show you how this might go. After knight to f6, chase, and now a game between Motwani and Collins. Knight f3, e6, d4 takes d3 again. So bishop to d3, bishop to b5 check, and bishop to c6. So we've got this tension in the centre that hasn't quite been resolved. You can always make an isolated queen pawn position by taking on d6, but knight c2 happened now, and now d5 is the sort of position that I think will gladden White's heart. We're not too fussed about material. We're very much keener to get on with development, and if black takes the rook on a8, then takes on e6, and black's in a certain amount of trouble. So we play perhaps for black knight to d4. Whoops, knight to d4, queen to g4, and now takes on d5, takes on e6, bishop to e3, queen to h3, takes on d4, and rook fe1, and the storm clouds are starting to build over the black king's head. Takes on e6, rook ae1, and now white finishes off with takes on e7 twice, queen to e6, queen to d6, check, and check, and at this point black gave up. There's the material's about equal, but the king was never going to find any peace, and there's plenty of ways for white to follow up here, which I'll leave to you to. I've not worked them out, but you have a go at yourself. If they so hiding on g8 is going to get mated, and coming forward to g6 may fare the same, have the same fate. So very sprightly game there. I mean, perhaps at the time it was a Grandmaster versus International Master, but a very nice example of how pawn weakness is perhaps not less important than white's development and space. Similar sort of game. I think this game didn't arise out of the C3 Sicilian, but after I showed you a line with queen to d6 here, of queen to d8, and now just some natural moves from white, and white's kind of winding up for queen to d3 here with an attack on the king's side, and this game actually started with d4, and rook e8, queen d3 there, as the battery as promised, h4, bishop g5, and rook a d1. So I mean, it's very, very easy to understand white's development plan here. I mean, hard to play with great accuracy, I think, but some very easy ideas for white to play and understand here. Now white might try and hack through on g6, but decided, perhaps sensibly, that was a bit too hard to crack, and instead went for the other diagonal and a break with d5. So a6, d5, and black has lost tactical control of that square entirely. And now there are some interesting variations. I mean, if takes on d5, takes on e7 is easy enough. Takes on d5 with the knight, and will take on d5 again. So there's some problems on e7 for black. Bishop takes g5, and then takes on d5, and now takes takes, and knight takes d5, and white's all over the black king. So after d5, black played knight to a5, trying to get rid of that bothersome bishop, and after d takes e6, white decides to let him. So all sorts of exciting possibilities here. Knight takes b3 was the game. E takes f7, check, queen check, knight e5, rook takes d8, queen f7 check, and queen takes b3, and this is all, sorry, rook takes e3, rook to e3, rook f8, bishop takes e7, and it's all gone wrong for black. So after d takes e6, another critical line clearly is to play rook takes d3, but after takes on f6 there, with check, white's going to pick up both rooks and maybe some other material as well, because the bishop on e7 is still awkwardly placed. So very sprightly attacking game there by Artur Yusupov against Eric Lebron from the 1990s, and just a fine idea of how to play an isolated queen-pawn position for white.